everybody. Welcome to Season 1, Episode 6 of the Aftermarket Insider. I'm your host, Joe Sebergandio, and this is your podcast for May the 19th, 2020. Welcome, everybody, and thanks for taking the time. We appreciate having you with us. If there's somebody that you may know that's into these types of podcasts, let them know about us. We've got a great show on tap for you today, everybody. One of the coolest cats you'll ever meet in our industry, and one of the big movers and shakers that represents some of the major stars and brands in our industry. Carson Lev, the president of Redfin Productions, will be joining us in the podcast, and we're going to find out what's been happening over there at Redfin Productions. Also a part of the program tonight is the premiere of Make It Count with Kelle and Kelle Oeste. This segment is going to focus in on employment, not only for young folks trying to break into the automotive aftermarket, but in light of this pandemic, we're going to hopefully have some opportunities where we can help some folks that may be of our age as well. I'm really looking forward to that segment. I want to begin the program by thanking our sponsors at Pioneer. You know, Pioneer is a global leader in electronics, and they're proud supporters of automotive enthusiasts and events everywhere. You know, no matter what you drive, Pioneer has the gear to upgrade your ride. Check out all new Pioneer technology, including Bluetooth, Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, and new for 2020, Amazon Alexa. Remember, don't break up with your car, upgrade it. Learn more at pioneerelectronics.com. Hey, I want to thank a lot of the folks who have joined up on the Automotive Aftermarket Insider Facebook page. I'd like to thank Elise Borla, Chris Thompson, Russell Stevens, Dan Baumgart, Joel Ayers, Alan Root, Ed Tilrock, happy recent birthday, Ed, Matt Hay, Larry Conville from Skyjacker, Catherine Reinhart from Four Wheel Parts, David Myers, Paul Conliffe, Chris Karak, Jason Sakurai, Paul Weiner, Gail and Jerry Kalia, Ranch Pratt, Temecula Bob, Dan Kahn, Jim Marino, and many others. Thank you so much. We appreciate the support. Folks, it's been a good time here of late, at least in SoCal. The wristbands have been loosened up a tad. There are some soft openings. From what we hear, you'll be able to get a haircut and maybe frequent one of your restaurants on a outdoor basis. There is still some confusion from state to state, but as we intermittently drop in the news, we hear things like bigger openings in the states of California and a little bit more flexible happenings in Arizona and Colorado. So who knows? Those of us who are in the automotive world, we all look forward to being with each other. We look forward to attending events. We've had some good uptick on the event scene. We've already talked about the fact that it's full speed ahead for the Power Tour. It's full speed ahead for the SEMA Show. It's full speed ahead, Sand Sport Super Show, Off-Road Expo. So with all that in mind, hopefully we'll be seeing everybody soon. In the meantime, hopefully the podcast is filling a little bit of a gap. I had a good time last night participating on a podcast with my man, Kelle Oeste. And hopefully that'll be available for you guys to listen in. We had some good fun, and Kevin will be joining us a little bit later on, as I said, with Kelle, and we'll find out what's happening with him over at V8, Muscle Cars and Restoration. All right, so with all that said, when I first was crafting the notion of doing a podcast, I wrote a list of all the folks that I would love to have on the podcast, and somewhere around 4 or 5 was Carson Lev. And the reason for that is because I've learned a lot from the guy. He's a straight shooter. He's probably one of the better branders, marketers, definitely one of the premier experts when it comes to licensing. And when you talk about licensing and you talk about branding, they're critical for anybody that's really trying to get to that next level. And not all of us can get to that next level. Not all of us really have a brand or a product or even a story that warrants licensing or branding. But if you do, he's the guy that you go to. As a result, his portfolio is a who's who of real celebrities within our industry. The sponsors and those who endorse his celebrities that he represents are iconic. They're the Mother's Polish, they're the 3Ms, they're brands that you're all familiar with, MagnaFlow. This just doesn't happen overnight. So let's find out a little bit more about what's happening with Redfin Productions and find out from the man himself, Carson Lev. Carson, welcome to the podcast. How are you, brother?
I'm doing good, Joe. Thanks for the introduction. Thank you.
Look, I probably missed a few things, but let's help folks out here. although most of us know you from your automotive prowess and your participation, many folks may not be aware of the fact that you didn't necessarily start up in the automotive field.
No, it's an interesting story. I'll try to keep it short for you. My dad died early, so I was one of those kids who wandered around a lot. And my family doctor became like a surrogate dad. He had a Dino Ferrari. And I thought the fast track to a Dino Ferrari, and I was told how naive this was to be a doctor. So I pursued a biomedical, like a biology degree, a biochemistry, in hopes of being a doctor. But as a kid, I hung out at Lions Drag Strip and Ascot, and Wally Parks mentored me, and Mickey Thompson taught me how to wash cars. I used to take care of his cars and hang out the track, and drag racing guys like the Mooneyhams and Snake and Mongoose. And so I was just absorbed in that pool of car stuff. But back then, unless you were a driver or a fabricator, there wasn't a career, and most of those guys were part-time. And so I realized that being a doctor was a good way for me to have cool cars, until I went on rounds with my family doctor and realized it sucked. So I changed my major to medical product design because I had all these units. I got an industrial design degree, and I worked on my first year, I worked on CT scanners and MRI scanners. I was lucky enough to be assigned to a project that in 1974 was a Nobel Prize winning by a guy named Dr. Godfrey Hounsfield, which is CAT scanning, CT scanning. And I worked on the first dedicated head scanner. It was like rocket fuel to a career. I spent about 20 years in that field, but I always had cars and hot rods and boats and race cars in the garage. I did sign painting and lettering and race car lettering. So I was that weird kind of, you could almost say bipolar, right brain, left brain, doing science and medicine during the day. And at night and on weekends, I'm, painting cars and wrenching on cars. So it was hard to pin me down to one thing. So yeah, I started in that field, but then I got into technology and made a little shift.
What was it that you learned from the time in the medical field that maybe stimulated a potential change?
It's interesting. The first thing I learned in the medical field was the aspect of creating an experiment. What your hypothesis is, how you put a control group together, your experimental group, how you lock it down, you test it. And amazing as it is, that's not just a process for medicine. It's a process for marketing, for design, for engineering. And so testing your theories, I learned that linearity part of science can be very predictable, but you have to have lateral. What I discovered was that my family doctor saw me. I was in college in my last year. I was on an athletic gymnastics scholarship. I had an injury. I went to see him on my wrist injury, and he said, "What do you do?" And I said, "Well, I just got accepted to med school." And he looked at me and goes, "Kid, you're making a big effing mistake. I've known you since you were born. Here's the deal. No one has ever said to me, being a doctor must really be fun." He goes, "There's nothing fun about being a doctor. You're the kind of kid who can work as a doctor. You're probably smart enough you got accepted, but you need to be in a job that's passion driven and fun. That's your personality." And I thought, you're wrong. I went on rounds with him, and I realized, and this was in 1974, 75, I realized this job sucks. Out of a 13-hour day, you saw patients about 3 hours. And so what I learned was, it's funny, I tell my kids this too. Sometimes it's not about your plans you make, it's how flexible you'll be about your plans, because we all have to make changes. Nothing goes to plan. So it doesn't mean have a contingency plan. That's why they're contingency plans. They're secondary. But it's good to kind of have a primary plan and then a backup plan in case something goes wrong.
And someone kind of looking over your shoulder and helping you out too. And I've always felt that those
Yes.
of us who may have gotten lucky enough to get pulled through,
Yes.
the reciprocal way that resolved itself is that you did the same.
It's funny, I mention that all the time when I teach at the university, and being a mentor or having a mentor is critical. Mickey Thompson was a mentor to me. Wally Parks, my doctor, was a mentor to me. Ed Roth was a mentor to me. Kenny Youngblood, and then people in science and medicine were mentors. And so I really tell people, if you really want to grow a career, it's a great way of absorbing knowledge and then also transferring that. It's the best thing of being like on the assembly line and taking from one person, doing what you do and passing it on. And so I really encourage people to mentor, be a mentor. And if you're starting out, even at my age, I still have a mentor who was my high school coach, who is 87 years old, who I literally still talk to all the time and get advice from all kinds of things. So that, I agree with you on that one. You got to have a mentor.
And I'm sure that those who mentored you are extremely proud of what you've done so far, and you're still going, Carson. So that's really good advice. When did the dance officially start? Was it the early 90s with Mattel?
Yeah, so what happened is I started in medical product design in the mid-'70s and ran that. And then our government deregulated how medical products were done by the FDA. We know what happens with deregulation. Business got pushed offshore. So I was working in Irvine where there were 22 major medical companies. Within 3 years, there was 3 of them left because everything went offshore. Through Pfizer, I was able to go back to college and get like a computer science degree in CAD/CAM, CAD modeling, solid modeling, all the new technologies of design. And I was presenting at a medical conference, and I got approached by a venture capital company about starting up a California-based product development firm called Compression Engineering. They already had an office in Indianapolis. And so this was using computers to do design work, not drafting it, but all the analytical stuff, building models on 3D printers, testing them. And so I really got into technology with those guys. I ran that. So what I did was I was a general manager of the California office, and then later we had 6 locations later. So I chose 3 categories of clients. Number 1, medicine, because I knew my friends in the medical field needed fast development. Number 2, automotive, because I'm a car guy and a car buff. And number 3, as crazy as it sounds, toys. Toys are fun. Toys are incremental. They're not incremental, they're opportunistic. They don't work in small steps. They work in like a brand new idea comes out and it just blossoms. So you get these really creative people. So I just chose toys to kind of balance the real analytical part of the medicine, and if you're going to get a good staff, and so Mattel became my biggest client. I'm doing Hot Wheels tracks. I'm doing Barbie dream houses. I mean, we're going from a sketch on a piece of paper to a molded part in 8 weeks. Not just a prototype, a molded part. And so I'm getting more and more work with them. And so this was during the .com craze, right before the .com bust. I had some serious misgivings about the funding of the company and where it was going. They had leveraged everything to get the IPO. I don't like to be critical. I sometimes am. I don't like it, but it just wasn't. It was like simple physics that this much energy to get this thing launched we didn't have enough energy to keep it in the air, so to speak. So I started looking for a change. I left that company. I sold my stock. I got out of it. 6 months later was the .com crash. Everybody thought I was a genius. When they would call me and interview me, say, "How did you know? Was it gross national product versus indexes versus taxes and tariffs?" I go, "No, this was waking up at 3 in the morning with my gut on fire. This was all it was. I was scared."
Someone's sending you a message.
Exactly. And so but the head of worldwide engineering was a guy named Gene Inslee, another great mentor to me, who said, "What are you going to do now?" I said, "I don't know." And he goes, "Well, meet me for lunch." So I met him for lunch, and he said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "Really, I've been in medicine and science so long, in engineering. I want to have fun. I want to come back to what my doctor said." And he looked at me and goes, "Well, toys are fun." I said, "Well, Gene, you would hire me?" He goes, "Oh, God, yeah." So my first job, believe it or not, was not Hot Wheels. I was head of engineering for the Disney Entertainment Division.
Wow, that wasn't a bad second fiddle.
You need toy, game, puzzle, action figure, anything. Disney had the contract. And those things in those days were movie-based, entertainment-based. Shorter windows when the movies didn't last as long. So you had to have your product in the market really quick. We had to have 80% of our product by production in the market distribution point 30 days before the movie launched. So we were on a fast schedule. So I did that for about 2 years, but I did it because I knew the Hot Wheels job was going to open up. I was told that the director of design for Hot Wheels was probably not going to last much longer.
That was some good inside info too.
Yeah, that was my buddy Gene who said, "Look, I know you're a car guy, but just do this. Prove what you can do here." And so I went from director of engineering for Disney Entertainment to director of design for Hot Wheels. And I ran the division that did all the collector stuff, the NASCAR, Formula One, drag racing, everything but the little dollar cars and track sets.
Commuting up to El Segundo at the time, was that where they were still?
Yes, I just talked about that earlier. I lived down in South Orange County, just above Dana Point Harbor. It was about 62 miles to Mattel. So an average commute was about an hour and a half, sometimes longer. A lot of miles. But I told my wife I've driven shorter distances for worse jobs.
So how long did it take you to pinch yourself to realize that you had the gig at Mattel? I mean, man, from Disney to Mattel, you're on a pretty good path.
Yeah, well, I was lucky. I mean, and that's one of the things I use for my business. I worked for the largest medical company in the world, Pfizer. I worked for the largest toy company in the world, Mattel. I worked for a short time for the largest licensing company in the world, EMI. I know now I never want to work for the largest anything ever again. There's no advantage to scale. Sometimes not even if you're the guy at the top, there's not advantage to scale. It's just more infrastructure, and you learn quickly kind of what your bandwidth is, what your scale, where you're most efficient. It's almost like a horsepower to weight ratio. You can put a big old engine in a car, but it's more weight. sometimes a smaller engine with less weight. So anyway, I've learned a lot of valuable lessons. But Gene Inslee was a great mentor to me. And so I ran the design group for quite a while. And then when we built the twin mill, the full-scale car, that's when it changed and they gave me licensing, and that was another whole story.
When you were at Mattel, did you start to expand your contacts now? You know, you had mentioned you had a rapport earlier with Mickey Thompson and with some of the folks. I would imagine as you got into the Mattel gig, you started to really come in contact with more of the automotive folks. Is that where you met Chip, or had you met Chip prior to that?
I had known Chip when I was in the medical field from car shows, because I always had hot rods and cars, and I'd see him at car shows. And this was even before he went to work for Boyd's, when he was still at Osher Corporation and in Santa Barbara and community. I'd seen him at car shows and talk, and I knew who he was, and I knew there was a talent there. I mean, I definitely knew that. But yeah, the nice thing about the Mattel job is I could go back to all the guys that mentored me, like Mickey Thompson, Ed Iskandarian, Clay Smith Cams, all these companies that I admired and grew up with, and I could make replicas of their cars. So for me, it was living a duality. I was doing work, but I was celebrating my past. And I was
how about the meeting where you get to go to those guys, Carson, and have that conversation where you're going to make a model out of their famous race car? They probably automatically embraced you too.
Yeah, because the first question everybody says when I'm at a car show, when I knew I worked at Hot Wheels, was how can I get my car made as a Hot Wheel?
Sure.
And so being able to do that, and then for me, it was very important too. Mickey Thompson had passed, and I dealt with his estate, and Colleen Townsend Campbell, his sister. Little did I know, because in my city, I was on a Park and Rec commission for about 10 years. I was the chairman, and she was the mayor in San Clemente, or at San Juan Capistrano. We had done joint use projects together to take a county property and share it between two cities. And I sat across from her in meetings, never knowing she was Mickey Thompson's sister, until Wally Park's 90th birthday party. She came up, she says, I know we always talk business. I said, what are you doing here? She goes, do you not know who I am? I said, oh my God, Colleen, I am so stupid. She goes, thank you for celebrating Mickey's life with all those cars you've made.
Oh, wow.
So
how cool is
that's
that?
a nice little, my life has a lot of things that starts here. It comes all the way around, like with Snake and Mongoose, meeting them at the drag strip and bringing them into Hot Wheels, back to Hot Wheels, being part of the movie. I have a lot of these things that it kind of is another life lesson. Where you start sometimes is more important than where you're going. You got to have a direction. But honestly, a lot of the things in life that come back and celebrate where you start become more profound and more important to you, because it's your childhood, it's your history, it's your relationships. You got to have it's like a building. You got to have a good foundation.
How cool was it, Carson, to get that little cameo in the movie?
It's funny because Alan Paradise, who wrote that, had done a 8-minute documentary for the 30th anniversary of Hot Wheels. It was presented at the NHRA Museum, like an 8-minute documentary. Alan Paradise,
our San Diego guy.
Yes, Alan Paradise. We had gone to him when I was at Hot Wheels. We went to him. We said, "Look, we're doing this 30th anniversary, big celebration of Hot Wheels. Can you get archival footage and stitch it together?" And he's a writer. Write this treatment like a pseudo documentary of the history of Snake and Mongoose and Hot Wheels, and kind of celebrate us, celebrate them. Well, he got it all done, and Alan's I really have a lot of respect for this guy, other than just being a great friend. I think he's a great guy. And I looked at this and I said, Alan, this shouldn't just be an 8-minute or 12-minute documentary. This should be a movie. And Alan said, I don't know anything about writing a screenplay. I said, look, it can't be that hard. Look it up. Write a screenplay. And then he laughed. He goes, okay, but if this thing becomes a movie, I'm going to put you in it. And I looked at him and I said, don't screw up a perfectly good movie. So at first I was going to be a disgruntled drag racer, like a John Force kind of guy, like a burned out old guy. Then I was going to be a team owner. And then when it came down to the role I was given as the Lions track announcer, that was important to me because that was based on Steve Evans.
Oh,
and so the first call I made was Cam. I said, Cam, there's this movie going down. He goes, I've heard about it. I said, they've asked me to play a role back. And I'll tell you the inside story. It was really more Steve and Steve's personality than it was just a innocuous, non-named, the title of me was Lions announcer. And for whatever reason, they couldn't get it cleared or done. So I played the generic Lions announcer. But I said to Cam, look, I have a lot of respect for your dad. And his dad had passed. And I said, look, I'm only going to do this if I have your permission. And I got a nice compliment from Cam. And he said, you knew my dad growing up. You were there at that last drag race. You were there every weekend. I can't think of anybody better. So
nice.
That was an honor. It was an honor.
I remember very early on sitting at the back of the SEMA banquet when Dave and Steve would host it.
Mm-hmm.
And just my early years there, and just those two guys had a dynamic that has yet to be matched.
I agree.
And for you to have that soft touch to play along, his son, amazing young guy, mover and shaker in our industry.
Yep.
Back to Alan Paradise. You know, Alan used to submit features for us back when I was publisher of Sport Truck.
That's right.
One of the reps, and I would occasionally talk with him. And as you got to know him, he also had a cup of coffee, I think, attempting to be a catcher in the major league. So,
no kidding.
Yeah. So it's funny when you bring him up, as well as some of those other names. We were talking about when you were with Mattel, and you were really having the time of your life, and now you're with some of these manufacturers and actually replicating their cars.
Yeah,
you had known Chip from the days.
Right.
When did the Chip Carson that relationship go from a casual to maybe a topic of a professional business relationship?
It probably really started with the building of the twin mill. The twin mill was a 2-motor toy car that we decided to build into a real full-scale car for the Mattel 30th anniversary. And unfortunately, during that time, Boyd's went bankrupt. Chip called down to Mattel and talked to Larry Wood, who's Mr. Hot Wheels, and said, look, it's going bankrupt. Come and get this car, or it's going to be a hard time for you to claim a car that has no VIN, no registration. It's all a custom. And the bank's just taking things. So they went there in the middle of the night, and I've written a story about it. One day I'll publish it. And we kind of stole our own car back. We kind of stole it. We cut the gate.
Chip's heads up to come and get this thing?
Yes, and thank you to Chip, you know. And so took it back. And so that car sat in the back lot of Mattel for about 18 months. When I went from the Disney Entertainment job to the Mattel job, I interviewed with the head of Boys Toys. His name was John Handy, really visionary guy. He did Teenage Mutant Turtles, and he was really a smart guy, really a great and a very intellectual designer. Smart guy, but great design sense. And he ran all Boys Toys. So I'm doing my interview to go from Disney Entertainment to running Hot Wheels. I have to have his permission. It's into his group. And we get done with the interview, he goes, okay, well, you know, the job's yours. The job was yours when you walked in, but do you have any questions? And so I said, well, whatever happened to the twin mill? And John looked at me and he said, why would you screw up a perfectly good interview? He goes, you know, that thing's sitting in the back. I said, but it's our history. It's our, you know, it's the first originally designed Hot Wheels car. We need to build it. And so he said, okay, it's your project, but you don't have a budget. So that's where it started. I called Chip and I said, Chip, do you know any way that I could finish the twin mill and not have to spend money doing it? And we talked on the phone, and he and I had more of a casual, not really business. And he said, you know
quite the question that you asked him too. I mean,
well, right? Because I knew if anybody knew how to get something done and how to parlay resources and get samples and get motors donated or paint donated, it was Chip. He had that relationship at Boyd's. He was really that guy.
Yeah. And
so he said, well, here's the deal. Championship Auto Show is always calling us, asking us to put cars on display. And if you remember the early days of Ed Roth and Tom Daniels and the Red Baron, those cars were paid for by Championship Auto Shows to be on tour, and then that guy got the rights and made a model, so everybody got something. He said, you know what? Call Bob Larrabee Jr., who has since passed a few years ago, one of my favorite guys, and propose to him what you could do. So I called Bob Larrabee Jr. I said, hey, you don't know me. I go to some of your shows. We have this twin mill car. He goes, I know all about it. I know about it at Boyd's. I've been trying to get that on tour. What do I have to do? I said, well, as strong as this sounds, if you could fund the completion of this car, we'll give it to you to tour for 3 years. You can promote it. You can use it for advertising. You could sublet it for, because Eagle One used it as their car in the show. Sure. I said, and to sweeten the pot, I will give you $20,000 limited edition or 20,000 limited edition Hot Wheels cars, replicas of that, one in red, one in white, one in blue, for every year that you can sell for $20 each.
How smart.
And he said, send the car. So we wrote the deal up, and that became Chip and I working on that together, mutually, became the genesis of our career. Then when I took over and did more stuff with Hot Wheels, I did licensing with Chip and included his cars in our Hot Wheels cars. I started seeing him more socially. My wife and his wife got along great. My 2 daughters worked at his shop. Then the Diora 2 came on board, which, as much as the twin mill took about 6 years to build, the Diora 2 took 24 weeks. It was much more efficient. Chip and I built that together, and it was started off a Cadillac, subframe, and that car was built. That was at the Peterson Museum with Jay Leno for the Hall of Fame. So then, right about that time, about a year or two later, Rides, the documentary on TLC and Discovery, came out, and Chip was a part of that.
Still one of my favorite shows.
I still think it's the high water mark for documentaries on cars.
Without a doubt. Rides,
Bud Brunsman,
was awesome.
Bud Brunsman just did a great job of being creative, pulling the team together, telling a story with great lighting, great narration, great photography. And that whole thing was shot in 4K when 4K wasn't even being broadcast on TV. That's how much vision Bud had. That morphed into overhauling. About that time, so around 2003 is when overhauling launched. I'd been at Mattel 7 years at that time. And my little wanderlust needle's starting to bounce a little bit. I like to do new things, and 10 years seems to be the run for me on certain things. And so Chip's business is getting bigger. He needs more help. He needs more PR. He's got licensing contracts that aren't consistent. He's got sponsorship things that he doesn't understand. He's going here. He's not sure he's getting paid right. And we talk a lot. And I'm running licensing for Mattel, so I'm doing a lot of these things on behalf of Mattel. So we got to talking, and I decided I kind of wanted to leave, but Mattel was kind of intoxicating to me. And I'll tell you, I don't mind saying the story. Mattel spoke to my vanity. As a kid who grew up without a dad and kind of insecure, anywhere I went with a Hot Wheels logo on my shirt, I could get in. It was like the golden hall pass anywhere. It didn't matter if they knew me or not. And so I was kind of staying there for the wrong reasons. It really wasn't healthy. And the other side story is this was in the period of time when I got cancer. And luckily, I just had to have surgery, and I got through it. But I kind of decided that maybe staying there wasn't healthy for me. Good company, good guys, but not healthy for me. So I'm trying to get up the nerve to quit. They've got me on the promotion schedule for the next big job and next big budgets and stuff. And Chip calls me one day and goes, "What are you doing right now?" I said, "Well, I'm trying to get up the nerve to quit this place." He said, "Oh my God, you really? But aren't you supposed to be a VP? Aren't they gonna go, well, there's talk of that, Chip?" And he goes, "But Carson, it's Mattel, it's Hot Wheels, it's the biggest brand in the world. It's every guy's fantasy." I said, "Yeah, but Chip, it's not a match for me. It kind of is the wrong side of the vanity for me. You know, there's a lot of things, emotional things here that are great, but I need to move." He goes, "Okay, good. Len and I were talking last night. We want you to do all my licensing, all my sponsorships, all my contracts, run the shop. I want you to do everything. I'm going to build cars. You're going to do everything else." That's when it solidified into, for a few years, I ran his shop. I simultaneously ran Redfin because he told me to not shut down Redfin. My son had already started that. And so Redfin as a branding and marketing and licensing company was already in place. So for a while I ran both. And then the goal was all along that I'd go back to Redfin where I could multiply Chip's efforts even greater. But when he was gone on overhauling, he needs somebody there as a steward at the shop to make sure his vision went through, to make sure customers were taken care of, make sure reports were done and finances and, you know, contracts. He needed to make sure that was done. So yeah. And so then, oh gosh, maybe I've been in Redfin's now going on 17 years. I ran the Foose shop for about 5 years, and then we focused back on Redfin, and we were able to multiply Chip's effect even greater.
You know what I find very genuine about the relationship that you have with Chip is that neither of you have ever walked around with a big head or a puffed up chest. It was embarrassing to hear you say thank you and please as often as you do in Chip as well. When most folks that don't have a fraction of the abilities or the talent or the celebrity make demands that make you shake your head, I always enjoyed the simplicity and the easiness that I found working with you because, you know, at some point, folks do get a little bit too big for themselves. And that's never been the issue with you. And it was always an attractiveness because those of us who worked with you, the value proposition is that whenever we had the chance to work with you or your clients or your sponsors or Chip, there was such an immediate benefit for so many others. How have you been able to keep yourself in check while you've navigated your way through some of these iconic jobs in such a strong position? How do you keep it in check?
Well, thank you for that. And I appreciate it, but I've never tried to qualify who I am by my abilities. I try to qualify myself, and it's only my scale. I'm not better, worse, right, down, up, left from anybody. I just have my own system. But I always had a great mom who just passed away, who really kept me in check. But for the most part, really, and Chip has said it, and I agree with it, 100% of what we do is unnecessary. We're not feeding babies. We're not making medical equipment. We're not building houses. We're not solving cancer. You know, the car industry is 100% unnecessary. You can't let this ego thing run away with you. And you do have to kind of check yourself. And I'm honest too, that, you know, when I was there at the end of Mattel's, I realized I was kind of becoming the moth to the flame. I was like, I was kind of going the wrong way. And you know, I didn't come home and kick my dog and those kind of things, but I just realized I wasn't being centered to who I needed to be. But I mean, we're blessed to be in the industry we're in. We're blessed to have a job that's still at my age. I should have retired years ago. I still enjoy doing what I'm doing. But really for me, it's the people and the relationships. I'm a people person. I like solving problems. You know, I had this conversation with another client a little while ago who's got a problem going on with the contract. And I said, look, I'll never attack people. I'll attack the problem. You know, I don't want to fix the blame. I want to fix the problem. You know, I want to fix the thing. So
I like that.
And so, you know, I mean, I have my moments, you know, we're all humans, but we're blessed to be in this industry. My gosh, I grew up hanging out at all the racetracks and all the shops. And Ed Roth used to say, when I close the door at my shop at night, I got to make sure you're on the right side of it. He was the first one who affectionately called me the shop rat. He's like, you're a shop rat. You're just scurrying all around the place. Every time I turn around, you're running somewhere, you're doing something. And he taught me how to pinstripe. And later I got to bring him into Hot Wheels, which was fun. But having grown up in that and then spent years in medical and companies, you know, being able to live your life where it's a passion-based job and it's a people-based job, we're blessed. I mean, and then, you know, Chip's a pretty easy guy to deal with. You know, he's an emotional guy. He knows what he wants to do. He's highly creative. We have a great relationship. We're his exclusive representation. I can't do anything without him. I can't, if he doesn't do designs and work and stuff, I have nothing to transfer. He can't transfer anything unless I write the contract. We both come from design. I always say that Chip's in the design business. I'm in the business of design. He uses design as a design tool of what it looks like, how it emotes, how it makes you feel. Does it reflect something of your history? Does it pay homage to something? I use design as a business tool. I use design as a tool for business, for commerce, for branding, for saturation, for marketing, for exposure. And so the common thing is we both have that common element of design, but our careers went different ways. And so it's a nice balance.
I was stumbling across some of the, I believe it was Instagram for the SEMA schedule of activities and appearances for Chip from last year's SEMA show.
Yeah.
And I had a cup of coffee with you, as you know, as I was transitioning. And even as I look back at it now, at the time, I was unable to get my arms around it because you were very keen on qualifying the types of folks that you would even entertain a conversation with in terms of being a possible sponsor of or having Chip endorse a product. You did it and continue to do an exceptional job qualifying those folks. And the cost of admission to be a part of a Chip Foose team, although it was something that many, many folks had interest in, it wasn't necessarily something that everybody was able to afford within their advertising or marketing budget.
Right.
I guess what I'm getting at is that there was a lot of folks interested, but not many folks that could qualify.
Yeah.
It wasn't until I was able to maybe find a yes, and I realized that even when we find a yes, an interested client, that there was still a lot of work that had to be done in order for us to be able to accept that opportunity. And at every step, whether it was an appearance or whether it was a photo or a statement or a quote, every one of them you took to heart. And I realized that this wasn't some cash grab. This wasn't some deal where, hey, if somebody had the money, they would come on. I admire that. How important has it been for you to stay true to the fact that you didn't take everybody who had $100,000 bag of cash for Chip to show up and bless their product or paint their car?
It's one of the things that we never want to be arrogant or heady or conceited about our brand. You know, we're very blessed to be doing what we're doing. But also we look for companies that share similar values, have similar interests, or expose their brand in similar manners. So there are certain things we won't do. There was a famous story about Budweiser beer wanting to do a deal with Chip, and we turned him down. A good friend of mine worked there in marketing. And Chip's not a beer guy. And it was a bunch of money. And Lynn, his wife, said, oh my God, you turned this down. This was millions of dollars. And I said, Lynn, it's beer. We'd be forever associated with beer, but Chip's not a beer brand. Now, my client at the time, Ivan Stewart, if I could have got Tecate beer, I would have jumped on it. So you can never force fit it if it's not right. Chip has a certain brand equity. So we look for companies that have the similar brand equity. And I know our threshold is higher. But when you look at what our activation is and what we bring to the brand, we've uplifted all those people. We've helped them with social media, with marketing, penetration to new markets, licensing sales. So for us, our licensing deals and our marketing deals aren't somewhere they write a check and they lose money. We partner with them, and this is an investment to gain money, to either gain a market share, gain profitability, or define your future. And it's one of the things I've always run my business by is you've got to be value added. You have to do two basic things. You have to have value and differentiation. So value means what the brand is worth. What's Chip worth? Does he have value? And the qualifier to that is not to be arrogant, but they wouldn't call us if they didn't see value. So if it was, Carson's taco truck that nobody knew about that I had parked in my garage, nobody would be calling me. But if it's the best taco in the world and it's for the money and it's fresh or whatever you qualify it by, it has value. Well, now that it has value, all we need to establish is what's the financial levels to be respectful of that value. So that's where we start that. Differentiation is the second one. We have to differentiate our brand from other brands. We cannot spend, Mickey Thompson told me this, nobody wants to run, and I'm just going to say it's bold, nobody wants to run a race with their nose up somebody else's fanny. I always want to be the innovator. I don't care if I crash and burn trying, because eventually this stuff will work. I admired that about that man who was willing to put his dollars, his money, even when he was still running a press for the LA Times and building cars in his garage. And so differentiation is showing a different value. So we know that there are some deals that the thresholds don't work out. But I'll be honest with you, we have taken on some deals that were below our threshold because we saw an opportunity for us and for them. And so, I could take Chip to SEMA and have him sign autographs all day long with a bunch of companies we don't have contracts for. The real truth is, and I don't mind saying it here, at SEMA, the only autograph and appearances we do are for sponsors, our sponsors, and we don't charge them. SEMA is free.
How cool of you to even that, where everybody else takes
we try to make
sure you're trying to grab the cash through that SEMA show, and for you to totally take that out of the equation, I think is reflective of the type of act that you have there. Who's in the stable of sponsors for Chip and some of your clients now? Who are some of the active guys? I mentioned 3M and Mothers.
Yeah, the big sponsors for Chip right now are 3M, BSF Paint, Mac Tools, MagnaFlow Exhaust, Lincoln Electric, MHT Wheels. Those are the big ones. And then he's done a bunch of projects, of course, with Disney Pixar, with Motor City Casino he did. Oakley we used to have a lot of projects with. Right now we're really focusing more on the shop and on the social media for Chip. And then for other clients I have, I still do some stuff with Chris Jacobs. We do work with Disney. I'm very fortunate with Disney Imagineering. I have friends that work there. It's a long family story. My dad always wanted to work there. So I get to kind of relive that dream. But I do lecturing and construction at the Disney Imagineering conferences that are planning and design conferences. Chip and I went out there years ago after doing Cars Land. And one of the greatest compliments I ever got in my career was when we're all done, the guy who put the whole worldwide conference on said, having you two guys up here is like having Walt and Roy. Chip is Walt, Carson is Roy. And so now I speak to them about design and design management, how you objectively manage a somewhat subjective process, how you qualify design, because planners are, they're objective. Designers are subjective. And then NBC Universal, we've worked with them since movie 3, doing licensing, branding, brand management, contract administration, clearances, language clearances. And so, we do a lot of projects. I'm doing some guys in the automotive car care business. Some things tie back to my Hot Wheels days. Some other projects with NHRA and some of my NHRA buddies. I do some representation for some NHRA drivers. So, and actually, we have maybe a potential client. We've rarely had clients that are outside the automotive world. Years ago, we did Deadliest Catch. We did the 5 captains for Deadliest Catch. That was like herding cats.
One of my favorites, Deadliest Catch.
Yeah. We did some work for Matt Roloff and Little People Big World years ago. And I'm talking to a couple guys within the Gold Rush show right now that need help on branding, on marketing, and social media. So we're blessed. We're lucky, doing what we get to do.
Carson, I cheat during this podcast because it's not an interview. I just love going with the flow. And I had so many questions. And the reality of it is that I could probably keep this going for 2 hours. And I haven't even touched on the questions. There was one thing that I'd like to cover with you before we let you enjoy the rest of your day. And those of you who are listening, Thank you very much. Hopefully you're enjoying it as much as I am. We have Kevin and Kelle Oeste. They're going to be talking about their new segment, Make It Count, where we try to help folks find their way into the employment opportunities in the automotive aftermarket. That'll be coming up shortly. I wanted to get to probably the most salient point that we could make. I teased those folks that listen into the podcast about the fact that by listening in, we may be able to save someone's life. Why don't we take a second here and try to do that if we can in the next couple of minutes? I know that you have one of the coolest 59 El Caminos that ever graced the pavement of the United States. And every time I see that car, all other cars can just stop. I just love it. But you participate in a lot of shows, and you had one show, Cruising for a Cure, that takes place in Orange County. Unfortunately, it's postponed this year due to the virus.
Right.
We will announce their date for next year. I have that. But you went one year and you found out a little something that you weren't expecting to find out about.
Yep.
And if you could give folks a little bit of an idea of what happened and why it's so important.
It's interesting. Debbie Baker, who's a great, great friend, I call her my guardian angel, and you'll figure out at the end of the story why I call her that, had done this show, and we went to the first one up at El Toro, and I worked at Hot Wheels there. And so we brought all us guys, Larry Wood and me, who have these hot rod cars, drove our cars down. We brought our big Hot Wheels track down for kids and gave away Hot Wheels for kids to race. We did that for 3 years in a row and had a big, big thing going because, how do you get a kid to go to a car show? Well, you got Hot Wheels there. He's going to hang out. So it kind of became the attractive nuisance.
Sure.
And it worked good. It was fun for us. Us Hot Wheels guys got to hang out and talk to people and sign autographs, which is always fun. Anyway, in the third year of that, every year before she had said, Carson, did you get your blood test? And I'm in my late 40s. I'm like, Debbie, leave me alone. I can't say this now, but back then I said, go chase that old gray-haired guy. Now that statement is me.
Sure.
And so she kept saying, Carson, you got to get a blood test. It's important. So the third year of the show, she has her golf cart that's all decorated. She drives up and grabs me by the arm, literally just grabs me, shoves me in the golf cart and says, this year we're getting your blood test. Just shut up. So she's driving me to go get the blood test. And all the way, I am just trash talking her. Oh, look at that shop work. Oh, let's go say hi to Larry. Oh, look at this. She says, shut up. I get my blood test. She takes me back to my car, and she's gone. She's chasing some other unsuspected person. So about 2 weeks later in the mail, I get a letter from United States Blood Testing Labs. Well, I have a medical background. I have a biochemistry background. I know my numbers. And I open this thing up, and I go, oh, my gosh. My PSA number was 5.2. As a 49-year-old man, my PSA should have been about 0.001.
Wow.
5.2, anything above 4 is like what a 70 or 80-year-old guy would have in an extreme condition. I'm 5.2.
Do they send that to you like in a red envelope, or is this like
just a regular envelope? And God bless her. To date, she's saved the lives of thousands of men, probably 3,000 or 4,000, and I'm one of them. So anyway, I call my family doctor, who's a good friend of mine, and I tell him, he goes, come in, let's do a blood draw and see what's going on. Well, then he says, look, are you still riding your bike? I go, yeah, I'm still doing the triathlons. I'm still doing that. Oh, you got prostatitis because it inflames the prostate. They try to treat me for that. My number goes up to 5.6. About 3 months later, he goes, well, maybe it's just a urinary tract infection. They give me antibiotics. My number goes up to 6.1. About 6 months after that, he goes, well, maybe it's just prostatitis, which is inflammation of the gland. It's not it. My number keeps going up. So finally he says, God, this thing is really puzzling me. I said, look, his name was Scott Shipman, good friend of mine. I said, Scott, why don't we just do a biopsy and figure out what this is? He goes, oh, God, those things hurt. I go, hurt more than being dead? I said, it's the only way to find out because PSA means prostate-specific antigen. When your prostate is irritated for whatever reason, it creates this antigen that can be read in blood as a number. So think of it like the effect of an oyster and a pearl. That pearl shows that. So the reason an oyster creates a pearl, the sand's an irritant. It's rough around the edges. So it secretes that nice coating around it. Well, that pearl has a chemical structure to it. So think of PSA as the pearl. Only the pearl's not a good thing in this case. Anyway, so my PSA number, which prostate-specific antigen, kept going up and going up. And so finally they did a biopsy. Doctor called me. And before he even said a word, I said, so I have prostate cancer. He goes, did somebody in my office call you before I did? I said, no. Here's the news. When the nurse calls you, it's good results. When the doctor calls you, it's bad results. He said, I've been in this business 25 years. I never thought of that. One of my samples of the 5 samples came back. Debbie, I called Debbie next. The next call I made was Debbie. Debbie, doggone it. You caught me. I'm 50-51 at this time because they tried treating it. She said, hang on, I'm going to call you right back. 10 minutes later, she calls me. She goes, this was August 1st. she calls me and says, your surgery is August 18th with Dr. Jean DeCurnian at UCLA, the #2 prostate cancer surgeon in the world, because all her money went to UCLA. So I went there. I had what's called, not to get into great clinical detail, but let's face it, the thing guys worry about with the prostate, other than the location, is the two aspects of it is they worry about incontinence and impotence. If you catch it early enough, you have what's called a nerve-sparing surgery where you don't have to worry about that. If you wait too long, you're not a candidate for that. So I was the poster boy for early detection because I literally had no symptoms, nothing. So I caught it so early, only of the 5 samples they took, only one of them was cancerous. So I go through my surgery. I have a nerve-sparing surgery, kind of a partial resection of the gland. As I walk out the door, Dr. DeCurnian calls me in and sit down in this office and says, I just have to ask you at your age, why would you come in here? I said, well, Debbie Baker. He goes, oh, you're the one that Debbie sent me. Yeah. He goes, well, here's the funny thing. He goes, when I look at the clinical data on this and the biopsy after the surgery, yeah, within the whole gland, we took 5 samples within the whole gland that we resectioned. Only one of them was cancerous. And usually prostate cancer is very slow growing. However, in your case, this was very aggressive cancer.
Wow.
He goes, if you would have waited for a symptom, it would have been about 10 years. And he was a doctor and he knew I had medical background, so he could talk to me kind of street slang. He said, here's the deal. If you would have waited for a symptom, you'd been happy if I sent you home peeing in a bag. And all that other stuff, you could forget it. He goes, you will live a full life now because that lady, and this is when he used the term, she is your guardian angel. So I call her GA. I do whatever I can. I wrote a story about it to kind of be my therapy about how a car show saved my life, or why don't guys take care of their bodies the way they do their cars.
Where can folks find that, Carson?
It was on my Facebook page for a while. I could post it up. I could send a copy to you if you want it. It was in Drive Magazine. It was in Popular Hot Rodding. It's back from 2003, 2004, but I could send it to you.
I'd love it. If you could, we'll post it on the site. The Cruising for the Cure, the event that Debbie runs, and unfortunately, again, if you look at their website, but it's postponed until next year, September the 25th, 2021, next year's date.
Right.
Folks, those of you who have listened in and those of you who will listen to this podcast in the future, early detection for prostate cancer, there's a living testament right there. And my gosh, Debbie,
I always say that the thing that kills men is not the cancer. It's pride and vanity.
So check that at the door, right? Let's
yes.
And for those of you who would like to find out a little bit more about licensing and branding, who knows, maybe there's some manufacturers listening that have some advertising and marketing dollars that you haven't been spending at events that haven't been taking place. You'd like to maybe talk to Carson about some representation opportunities or conversations for Chip or some of his other clients. Carson, where is the best place for folks to get a hold of you?
You can reach me at Redfin Productions. If you just Google search Redfin, REDPHIN, because the REDFIN is the real estate guys. So I am Redfin, like dolphin, like you see in the background. That's the mascot for the office. That's Redfin, and the Redfin Bel Air car. Redfin Productions. It's spelled REDPHIN. We have a website, Redfin Productions. We have a Facebook page. You can, or if somebody wants to email me, it's real simple. It's just Carson, CARSON at Redfin, REDPHIN.com. And so we look at brand management, licensing, sponsorships, endorsements. We work with companies. We work with celebrities and drivers and people and designers.
You do that and a lot more. You're one of the better guys that roam our industry, and one of the guys that I'm thankful that I've had the pleasure of working with. I want to give a special thank you to you and a hello from Matt Hay, Pro Street legend. Wants to say hi to you, Carson.
Nice.
And I'm sure there's many, many others. It's been an honor to spend some time with you. You have an open invitation to come back.
Yeah, that'd be fun. Yeah, I always enjoy talking to you. This is kind of fun stuff, and I like giving a message about the Cruising for a Cure and that, so it kind of makes sense. So yeah, appreciate it.
All good stuff. Our best to you, Carson, and your family and your grandkids.
Yes.
Again, with your mom, and I know Mike Lavalley as well too, one of your favorites. So our condolences there as well.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, Carson Lev, everybody. Thank you so much for your time, and for those of you who have hung in there with us. We took a little extra time for all the obvious reasons there, but I want to bring on quickly, if we could, Kelle Oeste and Kevin Oeste. We're going to talk a little bit about a new segment that we brought up earlier called Make It Count. Kelle, Kevin, thank you for your patience. Welcome to the podcast.
Good morning, Joe. Afternoon.
How are you, Kelle? Hi, Kevin.
Hello, Joe.
Some pretty cool stuff with Carson there at Chip, huh?
Radio.
Yeah,
how do you follow and act like Carson?
Yeah, it's always a tough gig to follow those guys. It's like me following you. It's always a little bit tough. Kelle, thank you for making some time. I know that you guys are running a business there. So sitting here for an hour listening to a podcast, I'm sure, although it may be entertaining, it's probably also a little bit concerning because you probably got things going back on.
Well, that's all right. I'm glad to share the time for the common goal that we all have.
Yeah, and what I wanted to do here is maybe we can frame the structure of what we're trying to build here going forward. For those of you listening in, I had shared with some of you the fact that I was trying to really be focused on making something happen outside of the entertainment value of the podcast. And my goal was to see if we can find employment for some few folks during these next few months leading up to SEMA. And our focus, although it may have been initially towards getting young folks into the industry with a first-time opportunity, I started to realize many of our friends were either being laid off or let go or furloughed, so that the flavor of this Make It Count segment could be tips about gaining employment. And I knew that through our conversations and through what you guys do, which is you have a shop, that people coming and going and folks that are looking for work, or when you're looking for folks, there's certain skill set that you have learned from experience that I thought you could help share. So what I was hoping we could do is get a little bit of your take about how you see this going and what you think is important about the task that folks have about trying to find job, especially now in light of what's happening. What is the plan from your end?
From my end of it, like you just described, is just trying to help people prepare before going to apply for the job, and then helping them through the process of the application or filling out their resume, the right words to say when applying. The follow-up is so important, and their presentation if they get the opportunity for an interview. Those are some significant things that we watch for when we're hiring someone at our shop. And obviously when they leave, Kevin and I sit down and talk about that candidate and what we thought. But the process starts so far before the actual interview. And the initial communication with that person, whether it be by the phone or by email, if there's misspelled words or they say something that just isn't right, or they have a Facebook page that sends fireworks up that's like, don't hire this person. So we just want to kind of give some guidelines along that process to ensure that people have a better chance of getting a really awesome career in the automotive industry.
And I agree with that wholeheartedly. One of the things that I can almost see myself doing, or you can almost see anybody doing when they're in a vulnerable state, is knee jerking. They wake up, it's that Thursday after a tough Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and now Friday's around the corner and there's nothing happening and no money and bills. And it's like they start just doing things without thinking. They start picking up phones or sending emails before they had coffee and spelling their name wrong. And they're trying to get a $50,000 job from somebody they don't know. So having folks pause for a second before they want to rush seems to be one of the things that I'd like to focus in on too. And Kev, I see your face kind of going up and down there. Guys particularly just jump up, think they're going to just get something done without maybe thinking it through.
Well, that's absolutely true. And the knee-jerk thing, a lot of times we find people who see maybe an ad for a position in our business and then just fire off, not even a resume, but more of a straight email with a question that is really self-serving to them. So maybe it's, what are you guys paying? Or, where are you located? Because I want to be close to home. And they're kind of early dismissals, because what we're looking for is somebody who's going to take, even a couple of minutes to research, what we're all about, to see if it's even a decent fit. And Kelle can speak to that at length.
Kelle, when someone may apply for a job at the shop, what do you look for almost immediately? Like, what really gets you excited that you remember from experience that you could maybe share?
Well, for me, when they apply, I typically advertise on something like Craigslist or the Facebook job postings. And if their response contains any question about the information I have already provided, you're already telling me you don't follow directions, you are not resourceful, you don't pay attention to detail. And those things are very important to working here. Right. And so that's already initial checkbox, right?
Great
and
tip.
then if you reach out and you call or you email and you follow up if we're busy and we didn't answer you within a day or two, that tells me, oh, you're interested and you're willing to follow up and you care. And then the communication, I fully understand. I was thinking about in the automotive industry, when you go to school, your weakness often at school is you don't like to read books. You don't like to sit in class and be still and be quiet. But those are strengths in the automotive industry. And while it may be frustrating to go to school and learn and your parents wanting you to get good grades, if you struggle with that, there are so many jobs in the automotive industry that take that weakness and it's a strength. And yes, you should read the instruction manual when you're putting a new part on a car, but it's something that you like and you enjoy. So you will read the instructions. It's not a dumb book about whatever, in school that doesn't matter. So we look at how they communicate. Communication is tremendous. We look at if they paid attention to the details, which is very important in the cars that we build. And then it's kind of when we meet with them, if we've, narrowed it down, yes, primarily it does have to do with, do you have the skill? Do you claim to know how to weld or be a mechanic, or have you painted anything before, or whatever the job is that they're applying. So from there, we have, 40 questions, and some of them are a test. It's tell me about yourself. And if you start telling me that, you don't have any friends and you hate whatever, and you're hanging out at the bar on Tuesday night and all kinds of bad things, that's not what you're supposed to say in an interview. So
my friends call me stupid.
My friends call me stupid. I say, how does your friends describe you? And one kid said stupid. And I'm like, why do I want you here?
Well, I also think that we've struggled the industry in some way where folks think when you're applying for a job in the automotive industry that it's it's a guy rifling through gears at a rear end, or he's putting together an engine and there's grease and cigarettes. What I find really so refreshing is that if you look at like the SEMA.org job postings, it's not just guys, putting gears in rear ends and rebuilding transmissions. There's jobs for events, marketing, human resources, advertising, social media, HR. So there is a somewhat of a feel that I think folks have when you encourage them to look into the automotive aftermarket. They think it's just hardcore mechanic stuff. And I was looking at, and I always did, not only when I was working and I was well entrenched in a corporate life, but also when I had my own agency. I loved looking at who was hiring, because it just told me a lot about what was happening in the industry and, who was expanding. And when I looked at the SEMA job offerings when the pandemic first broke, it was March, and some of the job offerings were posted back in January or February. There was a dormancy where there was nothing. And that was just reflective of the sad state that we were in. Now, when I look at it, it's started to be revitalized. There are an enormous additional list of job opportunities that are currently out there, and they run the gamut from Power Media to Fox Factory to major retailers. So there is, I believe, Kelly, a new shift and possible opportunities. And I think now this segment, Make It Count, and I love that name, Make It Count, because look, if it's ever a situation where you've got to make it count is when you're looking for a job.
Right.
I'd like to maybe work with you to see what we can really do within these next few months. And
Okay.
as I said earlier, for those of you who may be listening and you may be in a hiring situation, maybe you're a manufacturer, maybe you're Ed Zinke, or maybe you're James Lawrence from Power Media, right? And you are looking for some folks. Look, let us know about it. I'll talk to Emmanuel. We'll put an opportunity and a posting on our website, the Aftermarket Insider. And if you are looking and seeking employment and you'd like to post up some information about yourself and what your skills are, we'll have an opportunity for you to do that. And our goal would be to see if we can play Cupid here. And along the way, I know the types of people that Kelle and Kevin are. We'll do our best to see you through this. I'll do my best, although I'll play second fiddle to Kevin and Kelle because they're really into it and they really are seeking folks to come to work for them. And they have interviewed a lot of people. I haven't, but I have a little bit of a certain idea about how I may want to assist. I've had some help from Ira Gabriel, who is a big part of the SEMAYOUNGGUNS, and that focus is attracting 27 and younger young folks who want to become builders in the industry. Through that event, I've kind of got the fever to maybe be that person to help get folks working, because I don't know how I got lucky enough to get this job, and I appreciate and love all the benefits it's given me and my family. And I would like to find a few other Joe Sebergandios and Kelle Oestes and Kevin Oestes as well, especially during this time. So if we could work towards that, and if folks, you have any comments or you have any questions for Kelle or Kevin, send them our way. We'll get them answered. Kelle, knowing that you and Kevin have a full dance card between the shop, between your own radio podcast, through your own extracurricular activities as MC and host and building cars, I don't expect to, but would like to give you an open invitation to be a part of any of our podcasts when you feel it's appropriate. And if there are some things that maybe you would like to leave us with for this show, please do, because I know that this is something that takes time away from what you do, and I really appreciate it. And as a result, I want it to be effective for you.
Well, Joe, I'd like to throw out an idea. I'd like to propose to everybody who listens to your show and everybody in the automotive industry to, when they are communicating with anyone they know about a job, if someone's looking for a job, educate them on the opportunities available in the automotive industry. Like you were saying, a lot of people, especially parents of high school kids and college kids, think that the automotive industry means to be a mechanic, means dirty knuckles, hard work, and maybe not a lot of pay. But all of us in the industry know that we have all had very rewarding careers in the automotive industry, and they have absolutely nothing to do with grease or turning a wrench or breaking our back. And
unless we wanted to.
Unless we wanted to. And there's absolutely, I'm mechanically inclined myself. I love to turn a wrench on a car, and it's very rewarding to me. But I learned that in large automotive factories, you could be a nurse. How cool would it be to be a nurse in an automotive industry? I do a ton of accounting work. I do a lot of HR. Kevin does marketing and advertising and graphics design. And I just think that if you're not in the automotive industry, you don't think our industry can provide those kind of careers. So that's my challenge to today is everyone out there, when you talk to someone who is looking for a job, see if you can find a way that what their skill set is or what they love to do can be applied to the automotive industry.
And there, folks, lies the confidence and the comfortability and pleasure I have knowing that Kelle and Kevin will be helping us with this segment. Folks, if you haven't had the chance yet, check out the V8 Radio podcast that Kevin hosts along with Mike Q-Ball Clark. I was a part of it last night. Clarence Barnes was on there recently. They had Peter McGillivray. It's a fun show. Kevin is great at what he does. You can find out and see more of Kevin, and usually when it's Kevin, it's Kelle as well, at the Bonnier event series. Kevin helps us with a myriad of duties, including emceeing and hosting at the Street Machine Nationals in St. Paul that are upcoming. He also is a big part of the SEMA show, as you know, hosting the SEMA Central, the SEMA Awards Banquet, and the co-host of the SEMA Cruise. He's been a good friend and somebody that I'm proud to ride alongside with. And Kelle, I would be remiss to not say how much I enjoy working with you as well. We've been, in the last 8 months, we've seen each other in Minnesota and in Saudi Arabia. So hopefully we'll continue to see each other as this pandemic lightens up. And thank you for being a big, big part of today's segment.
Thank you for involving us, Joe. We really appreciate it.
Nice. Well, there you have it.
Joe, and I will throw one more quick thing. And part of the career story is the story. And Joe earlier said he doesn't know how he got involved in all this. If you tune into our V8 Radio podcast, you'll hear Joe tell the story of going from a doorman in Daytona to being the hot shot that he is now. It's really worth listening to. It's a great story, and it will inspire anybody. So check it out.
Thank you, Kevin. We all start somewhere. This was a great hour of my day. I hope you can say the same. I want to thank our friends from Pioneer Car Electronics. Don't forget, folks, don't break up with your current car audio. Upgrade it with Pioneer. Special shout out to Carson Lev. Thank you so much, Carson, for your time and your stories and all the cool things that you do. I want to give a thank you to Emmanuel. And I want to leave the podcast by congratulating my daughter, Nicole, and her boyfriend, Dave, for being the first 4-year graduates in our family. Congratulations to them. We wish them the best, as well as all the other graduates who, unfortunately, may not be celebrating their long-anticipated graduation in light of the virus. But those of you who graduated this year, continued success. You folks are really shaping the future of not only the world, but also this industry. So anybody that's listening that graduated that wants to get involved in the automotive industry, check us out. The next podcast is slated for the 26th, and it's highlighted by the man in black. The man himself, Bud Brutzman, will be joining us, and he had one stipulation. You'll have to tune in to find out what that was. Also been working on Doug Evans. Look forward to having him on. Reached out to a few other folks, and as we continue to grow, folks, hopefully so will the talent that makes our show what it is. It all lies in the guest. I'm your host, Joe Sebergandio. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you on the next Aftermarket Insider. Thanks for listening. See you next time.